Imagine you are looking at the resume of a band that sells 75 million records.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they rack up over 40 number 1 hits and just fundamentally rewrite the rules for an entire genre of music.
Right. A total juggernaut.
Exactly. But then you flip the page and look at their press clippings from the exact same era.
And it's a completely different story.
It really is. You see music critics absolutely thrashing them. And then if you go a layer deeper, you find the secret internal structure, one that treated a foundational face of the franchise member less like a brother and more like a gig economy contractor.
Which is just wild when you think about their public image.
Completely wild.
Right.
And it all ended in a bitter lawsuit.
Like, the contrast there is so jarring. Because, you have this massive unified force that the public sees, right? They're dominating the radio, packing arenas.
Yeah.
But underneath that surface, the mechanics of how the music was actually made, how it was packaged, and how the business was structured well, it paints a much more complicated picture of what it really takes to stay on top.
Welcome to our deep dive into the source material. Today, we are looking at the legendary country music group, Alabama.
It's a great topic.
So, okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today for you listening is to figure out the story of how 3 cousins from a cotton farm built an absolute empire.
All right.
We are looking at the rock and roll edge that revolutionized country music, the controversies hidden behind their clean-cut image, and, the lasting legacy they left on the industry.
And we're tracking their journey from a high school talent show all the way back in 1969 up to a surprising on-stage reunion that happened just recently in August of 2025.
Right. So where do we even begin with this?
Well, the sources for this one are fascinating because they don't just give us a straight biography. They actually offer a really comprehensive case study in how outsiders can just capture an entire industry.
Outsiders being the key word there.
Exactly. I mean, if you look at the country music establishment in the late 1970s, it was a highly controlled environment.
Very gated.
Right, very gated. But Alabama, they totally bypassed those traditional gates.
And the reason they bypassed them, and honestly the reason they sounded so different from those polished acts coming out of Nashville, is because their sound wasn't engineered in a boardroom.
No, not at all.
It was forged out of sheer desperate hustle. I mean, to understand the music, you have to look at the origins.
You really do.
We are talking about Randy Owen and Teddy Gentry, 2 cousins who grew up on separate cotton farms on Lookout Mountain near Fort Payne, Alabama.
Right, so real deep rural roots.
Exactly. They learn guitar, they sing in church, and then in 1969, they join up with another cousin, Jeff Cook, and they form a band called Young Country.
At that point, it is purely a passion project. Like, they actually win a high school talent show.
Oh, yeah, the prize for that was tickets to the Grand Ole's Opry, right?
Yeah, tickets to the Opry. But, they still had to face reality. Music just wasn't paying the bills.
Right, because Randy goes off to college.
Yeah, Randy's in college. Teddy is literally laying carpet full-time to make ends meet.
That is back-breaking work.
It really is. And Jeff takes a government job in Anston, Alabama.
Man, if you've ever tried to pursue a creative passion while working a grueling day job, you know exactly what that tension feels like.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, they aren't born into music royalty. They don't have these shiny industry connections. They share a $56 a month apartment in Anniston just to keep this dream alive on the weekends.
$56 a month. That really puts it in perspective.
It does. And then, in 1973, they make the terrifying leap. They quit their jobs, relocate to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and become the house band at a club called the Bowery.
And the Bowery was, it was really their crucible. They were playing for tips 6 nights a week.
It's nights.
Often for hours on end without a real break. I mean, they were covering Leonard Skinner, Merle Haggard, basically anything the crowd wanted to hear.
Which is how you learn to read a room.
Exactly. When you play a noisy bar night after night, you learn how to command the audience. You learn that you have to be loud, you have to be tight, and you have to keep the energy up, or people stop buying drinks and you don't get paid.
And that environment fundamentally alters a band's DNA.
It really hardens them.
But the hustle off the stage was even harder. And this is the part in the sources that really highlights how broken the music industry can be for newcomers.
Oh, the GRT Records deal.
Yes. So in 1977, they finally land a record deal with a label called GR2 Records. They release 1 single. It barely makes a dent on the charts.
Right.
And then GR2 Records declares bankruptcy.
Which is just a nightmare. Because a bankruptcy in the record industry doesn't mean the artists are suddenly free to go elsewhere.
Wait, really? Most people probably assume the contract just voids out.
You'd think so, but no.
Yeah.
Record contracts are essentially liens on an artist's exclusive services. So when GRT went under, The label's assets, including Alabama's contract, were frozen in bankruptcy court. Yeah, a hidden clause in their contract meant they were legally prohibited from recording music for anyone else. They were trapped by a ghost company.
That is the ultimate nightmare scenario. It's like an indie startup being trapped by an ironclad non-compete agreement from a parent company that doesn't even exist anymore.
That's a great way to put it.
So to get out, they had to raise their own money to buy out their own contract. They actually borrowed $4,000 from a local Fort Payne bank.
$4,000 in the late 70s.
Right. And they used that money to press their own records independently, and they physically mailed handwritten letters to radio DJs across the country, just bidding for airplay.
And well, what's fascinating here is that this devastating legal trap is the very thing that saved them from becoming generic.
How so?
Because if a major label had picked them up and fully integrated them into the system in 1977, they likely would have been handed over to the Nashville machine.
Ah, right. And for you listening who might not know the inner workings of that era, the Nashville machine was essentially an assembly line.
It was a factory.
Executives would find a good-looking solo singer, pair them with a professional songwriter, and then send them into a studio with the A-Team.
The legendary A-Team.
Yeah, this group of highly skilled, anonymous session musicians. The singer just stood there and sang. The session players provided all the music.
Exactly the opposite of what Alabama was doing.
Right.
Because they were frozen out of that system, forced to raise their own capital and play those dive bars, they developed a sound that was completely self-contained.
They didn't need the session guys.
No, they played their own instruments. They developed their own intricate vocal harmonies. So by the time they finally broke free and caught the attention of RCA Records in 1980, they were a fully formed, road-tested unit.
But the band that signed with RCA in 1980 had made one crucial addition.
Oh, this is the turning point.
It really is. They brought a secret weapon with them from Myrtle Beach, and this addition is what truly altered the trajectory of country music. In 1979, they hired a drummer named Mark Herndon.
Right.
And Herndon was not a country drummer, he was a rock drummer.
This cannot be overstated. If you listen to traditional country music from the 60s and 70s, the drums are usually played with brushes.
Very soft.
Very soft, yeah. The rhythm section is just there to keep time quietly in the background, making sure not to overpower the vocals or the steel guitar.
But then Herndon comes in.
Right. Mark Herndon brought a heavy, prominent, driving kick and snare beat. I mean, he hit the drums hard. It was a rhythm you could physically feel in your chest.
And that rock beat changed the entire physical experience of a country song.
It really did.
It gave their music this relentless forward momentum. The resulting explosion of success is almost hard to comprehend. Like in 1980, they released Tennessee River on RCA.
And it hits #1.
It's #1. And that sparks a streak of 21 consecutive #1 country singles.
21. It's insane.
You are looking at massive tracks: Love in the First Degree, Mountain Music, Dixieland Delight, Song of the South. In the 1980s alone, they achieved 27 #1 hits.
The commercial scale was just unprecedented. I mean, they were moving millions of units, achieving quadruple platinum certifications in a genre that just wasn't used to those kinds of pop-level sales figures.
Yeah, country didn't sell like that back then.
Not at all. By 1982, after just 2 years on the national radar, they had sold over 6 million albums.
Mm.
The Country Music Association named them Entertainer of the Year 3 years in a row.
And they were the first group to ever win that award. Right?
Yes, the very first group.
Think about the visual shock of that to the country music establishment.
Oh, they must have been terrified.
Because the traditional Nashville aesthetic was heavily manicured. You wore rhinestone suits, you wore cowboy hats, and you kept your hair short.
You stood still.
Right, you stood in front of a microphone and delivered the song. And then Alabama rolls in looking like a southern rock band. They had long hair, thick beards, and they were performing in sneakers and T-shirts.
They completely shattered the visual and structural paradigm of what a country act was supposed to be. They proved that a self-contained band could be a blockbuster act.
Absolutely.
And because they had that driving rock rhythm, they couldn't just play standard theaters anymore. They brought arena rock production elements into country music.
We're talking massive lighting rigs.
Huge sound systems. And a physical stage presence that involved running around and actually engaging the crowd. I mean, they weren't performing a country recital, they were putting on a rock concert.
Which fundamentally shifted the business model of country touring. But, anytime someone changes the rules that drastically and achieves massive pop crossover success,
Here comes the backlash.
exactly, you are going to see a fierce backlash from the purists. And the music critics of the day absolutely despised Alabama.
Despise is almost an understatement. The reviews from that era are scathing. Critics called their music vacuous and watered down.
Ouch.
Yeah. The sources point out that reviewers routinely accused Alabama of rendering country music indistinguishable from mainstream pop, arguing that they were trivializing the hallowed traditions of the genre.
Okay, I have to push back on the critics here.
Go for it.
I am looking at the lyrical content of these massive hits, and I find the criticism a little baffling. The fans were buying millions of albums records like Roll On and 40-Hour Week.
Right.
And 40-Hour Week is literally an anthem dedicated to the American blue-collar worker. It mentions auto workers in Detroit, steel mill workers in Pennsylvania. If your lyrics are deeply rooted in the gritty, relatable reality of working-class life, how can critics call it watered down or inauthentic?
Well, you are zeroing in on the exact friction point. The lyrics to songs like Dixieland Delight or Tennessee River were incredibly authentic to their lived Southern experience.
So what was the problem?
The critical tension wasn't really about the words they were singing. It was entirely about the sonic packaging.
The pop sound.
Exactly. Music critics, especially in historically rooted genres like country or even hip-hop, they often operate with a built-in bias. If the production is too polished, the amplification too heavy, and the commercial success too vast.
They assume the artist has sold their soul.
Precisely. They assume you've sold out.
It is the classic, they went mainstream so they aren't real anymore argument. The critics couldn't separate the arena rock drum fill from the blue-collar lyric.
Exactly. The critics saw the sneakers and the pop rock harmonies and just decided it wasn't country. And eventually, the broader industry did course correct to align with that traditionalist sentiment.
Yeah, music trends always swing like a pendulum.
They do. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, that pendulum swung back hard.
Yeah.
Alabama's sales dominance began to cool off because the spotlight shifted to a movement called the New Traditionalists.
Right, this is when artists like George Strait, Alan Jackson, and eventually Garth Brooks take over.
Exactly. The New Traditionalists actively rejected the pop crossover sound. They brought the cowboy hats, the fiddles, and the pedal steel guitars back to the center of the mix.
Back to the roots.
Right. And to this new, younger audience that was craving a return to roots, Alabama's glossy pop rock production suddenly started to sound like a relic of the 80s.
The speed at which the music industry moves is just brutal. You are the rebellious pioneers one decade, and you are the outdated old guard the next.
It really is unforgiving.
And as their chart dominance faded into the 2000s, the band embarked on a massive, highly lucrative American farewell tour in 2003 and 2004.
Which was huge.
Huge tour. But this is where the sheer exhaustion of 20-plus years of nonstop touring cracks the facade. Because to the rest of the world, Alabama was the ultimate band of brothers.
Oh yeah, they were marketed as family, 3 cousins and a drummer who had taken on the world together. You can't manufacture that kind of tight-knit image.
Or so we thought.
Right.
Because in 2008, the public image was shattered. The founding cousins Randy Owen, Teddy Gentry, and Jeff Cook filed a lawsuit against their drummer, Mark Herndon.
Which is crazy on its own.
And they sued him for $202,670 in alleged overpaid touring profits.
The lawsuit itself was surprising, yes. But the details that emerged during the proceedings were an absolute shock to the fans.
What came out?
Well, the legal filings revealed a dynamic that had been kept secret for decades. Despite Herndon being the guy who provided that signature rock beat.
The beat that made them famous?
Exactly. Despite his face being on every single album cover, and despite his portrait hanging in the band's official museum, Randy Owen testified that Mark Herndon was never an official member of Alabama.
That detail is staggering. The guy playing drums on 27 #1 hits wasn't in the band.
Not legally, no.
If you've spent your life thinking of a band as a democracy, finding this out feels like a betrayal.
I mean, legally speaking, he wasn't a partner. According to the foundational documents of the business, Herndon was simply a paid employee. He was a contractor on a salary.
That is wild.
And Randy Owen even claimed during the dispute that it was the executives at RCA Records who forced the band to put Herndon on the album covers in the first place, supposedly because the label wanted them to look like a 4-piece group, kind of similar to the Beatles.
It is mind-blowing to realize that a band championing small-town, blue-collar values was operating with such a rigid corporate internal structure. They essentially handed the guy who built their rhythm section a W-2 form and said, "Thanks for the hits."
Yeah, pretty much.
But this reveals something fundamental about the entertainment industry, doesn't it? There is an enormous divide between the marketing of an act and the legal reality of an LLC.
Well, this raises an important question about the difference between art and commerce.
Yeah.
Alabama, the brand, sold you the emotional idea of four guys riding in a van together, taking on the world.
Right.
But Alabama, the corporation, was a highly structured partnership owned exclusively by the three cousins. Now, to be fair to the historical record,
Yeah, we should mention this.
right, Joe Galante, the RCA executive who originally signed them, he later went on record stating he had no recollection of ever forcing the band to include Herndon in their photos. So there are definitely conflicting narratives about who wanted what.
And Herndon's side of the dispute was that he was owed money for live albums and merchandise that used his likeness or his playing, which he felt he was never compensated for.
Exactly. It's the messy, deeply human element of massive financial success. When hundreds of millions of dollars are on the line, contracts replace handshakes.
They always do. But, the business side is incredibly messy, sure. However, the human element of Alabama's story isn't solely defined by lawsuits and internal disputes.
No, definitely not.
If we only look at the courtroom, we completely miss the immense real-world impact they had off the stage, which is arguably as significant as their record sales.
I'm glad you brought that up because that is a vital piece of the context.
Right. Even after the bitter lawsuits and the end of their primary run in 2004, they used this massive platform they built to enact tangible good in the world.
Oh, absolutely. Look at the June Jam.
Exactly. For 15 years, they sponsored a music festival called the June Jam in their hometown of Fort Payne. At its peak, this festival drew 60,000 fans to a small Alabama town.
60,000 people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
raising millions of dollars for local charities.
And that philanthropic impulse extended far beyond just their hometown. Randy Owen actually spearheaded a radiothon initiative called Country Cares for Kids.
This is an amazing program.
It really is. Over the years, that specific program raised over $70 million for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital.
I mean, think about the scale of $70 million. That is real money funding actual research and saving children's lives.
It's incredible.
It really shows you that underneath that corporate structure, there was a genuine connection to their community. And ultimately, it was the real world, the tragedies and the unbreakable bonds of their home state that pulled them back together on stage.
Because life has a way of resetting your priorities.
It sure does.
In 2010, Randy Owen faced a severe prostate cancer scare. He underwent treatment and thankfully received a clean bill of health. But, brushes with mortality often lead to reconciliation.
Yeah, it puts things in perspective.
That health scare paved the way for the cousins to start talking again. Then, in 2011, a devastating super outbreak of tornadoes ripped across the state of Alabama, destroying entire communities.
And in response to that disaster, the band organized a massive benefit concert in Birmingham called Bama Rising.
Right.
It was their first full set together since 2004, and they raised $2.1 million for the tornado victims.
And getting back on that stage, feeling the crowd again, it really seemed to thaw the ice between them. Patty Gentry even mentioned in interviews that they realized they actually missed playing together.
Yeah.
And that the grueling grind wasn't as bad as they remembered now that they could do it on their own terms.
So they slowly began touring again, but time catches up with every band. The later years of Alabama brought profound tragedy.
Badly, yes.
In 2017, their lead guitarist, Jeff Cook, publicly announced that he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. He bravely tried to keep playing, reducing his appearances at shows as his mobility declined, but he ultimately passed away from complications of the disease in November 2022.
It is a heartbreaking end to his chapter. His passing left Randy and Teddy as the two remaining original members, and it really felt like the definitive close to the classic Alabama era.
But our sources reveal a truly poignant coda to this story. Fast forward to August 24th, 2025.
Oh, this is amazing.
Randy and Teddy are playing a show in Huntsville, Alabama, and during the encore, they completely shock the audience. Mark Herndon, the drummer they had sued, the man who was legally deemed merely a paid employee, walks out onto the stage.
They reunited to perform mountain music.
Incredible.
Yeah, after the bitter lawsuits, the decades of tension, and the loss of Jeff Cook, they somehow found a way to stand on the same stage one more time.
It really serves as a powerful reminder that while the music business is cutthroat, the shared history of creating art that defined a generation sometimes transcends those legal contracts.
It brings the entire saga full circle. from playing for tips at the Bowery to filling arenas to sitting in depositions and finally back to a stage in their home state.
And when you synthesize all of this, you are looking at the most awarded band in the history of country music, holding over 200 major awards.
Their legacy is fundamentally structural. They proved that a self-contained group of musicians playing their own instruments could dominate the country charts.
Yeah.
Without Alabama knocking down the doors of the Nashville machine, you don't get the bands that followed in the 90s like Restless Heart or Lone Star. You certainly don't get the massive modern arena acts like Florida Georgia Line. Alabama paved the highway that the modern country industry currently drives on.
So to you listening, the next time you turn on the radio and hear a country song with a heavy, driving rock drum beat, or the next time you are standing in a stadium shouting along to a massive country chorus.
Remember where it came from.
Exactly. Remember where that formula came from. You are hearing the direct echo of three cousins from Lookout Mountain who decided they wanted to play country music with the volume and intensity of a rock band.
Which leaves us with a fascinating final thought to consider.
Let's hear it.
Well, Alabama faced decades of harsh criticism from purists for being too calculated, too polished, and too pop-oriented for traditional country music.
Yeah.
But when you look at the landscape today where massive pop country crossovers and rock production totally dominate the charts, it really makes you wonder.
Wonder what?
Were Alabama actually abandoning country traditions back then, or were they simply 40 years ahead of everyone else in predicting exactly what country music was destined to become?